Picture a young child playing outside at dusk. He's laughing too loud, his energy wild and uncontained. Then his father's stern voice cuts across the yard. "Stop shouting. Don't be so loud. Be good." The child freezes. He wasn't trying to be bad. He was just being. But in that moment, he learns a subtle lesson. Some parts of him are welcome in the light, and others must be pushed into the dark. This is how the shadow is born. One of the scariest things about yourself is not what you already know, it's more about what you refuse to see. Jung called it the shadow, and this shadow is deciding more about your life than you really acknowledge. So stick with us, as by the end of this video, you will never be able to see your life in the same way again. And if you are interested in more insights like this, don't forget to subscribe to Factspire TV. Let's get going. The shadow is not a moral category. It isn't evil. It is simply what we have rejected. And every rejection adds another piece to the growing figure behind us. Think back to childhood. Maybe you were told, don't be angry, don't cry, don't show off, don't be selfish. What happened to those emotions? You didn't erase them. You buried them. You locked them away in what Jung called the shadow. Imagine a great chest inside you, black iron and heavy. Every time you hear don't, you place another piece of yourself into the chest and slam the lid shut. Over years, that chest grows full, and though you keep it locked, its contents never stay still. This is why Jung warned that the shadow has immense power, because what you push away doesn't disappear. It waits, it lingers, and it wants to return. You see, the shadow always follows. You can walk through life in the brightest daylight, dressed in success and charm, and still, behind you, your shadow stretches, dark and undeniable. And here's the law: what you refuse to see will rule your life. Think of the preacher who rails against sin, only to be exposed in scandal. The comedian who makes millions laugh while secretly drowning in despair. The friend who insists she's always fine, while loneliness gnaws at her unseen. This is shadow at work. The parts of us we exile do not go away. They press against the walls of the psyche until they find release. In projection, in sudden anger, in secret addiction, in the very behavior we thought we had rejected. Jung said it best. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. The shadow is not just personal, it is collective. Entire cultures push aspects of humanity into the dark: sexuality, vulnerability, weakness, rage. But whether in the individual or the culture, the law remains the same: the repressed will return. This is why the shadow matters, because every time you look away, it grows. Every time you deny it, it gains strength. Every time you say, "That's not me," you hand it the strings of your life. The shadow is not your enemy. It is your unfinished business. And until you face it, it will shape your choices, your relationships, even your destiny, from the dark. So the question is not, do you have a shadow? Everyone does. The question is, will you face it or will you let it rule you? The shadow is born the moment we begin to repress. But repression does not destroy, it multiplies. Imagine pushing a ball under water. The harder you push, the stronger it fights to rise. That's the law of repression. What you bury does not weaken, it builds pressure. And eventually, it resurfaces with greater force than before. Carl Jung warned that the psyche has its own balance. What you deny in one place appears in another. If you exile anger, it returns as bitterness. If you bury desire, it re-emerges as obsession. If you suppress sadness, it hardens into numbness. The unconscious has a rule. What is refused in the light will rule in the dark. Think of the preacher who condemns lust, only to be exposed in scandal. Or the perfectionist who hides all weakness, until one day she collapses under the weight of silent despair. Or the friend who insists he never gets angry, but whose relationships keep breaking from sudden explosions of rage. This isn't hypocrisy. It's psychology. Repression turns the shadow into a puppeteer, and the more fiercely you deny it, the tighter its grip becomes. Jung said, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses." In other words, by condemning your shadow, you do not kill it. You feed it. You see this law everywhere. The man who buries his vulnerability becomes consumed by proving his toughness. The woman who hides her selfishness becomes obsessed with pleasing others, until resentment poisons her kindness. The achiever who denies laziness works until his body collapses. The irony is cruel. The more you reject a part of yourself, the more your life becomes defined by it. Think about projection, one of the shadow's favorite tricks. The envy you won't admit in yourself, you project onto others, seeing jealousy everywhere. The anger you bury, you suddenly notice in the aggressiveness of colleagues or friends. The desires you repress, you criticize in strangers. The shadow does this because it must find expression. If it cannot live inside you, it will live outside you, in your perception of the world. And so the law reveals itself. What you refuse to see in yourself, you will see everywhere else, until it rules you completely. This is why Jung considered repression so dangerous. Most people believe they are living moral, controlled, respectable lives. But in truth, they are at the mercy of forces they refuse to name. The addictions, the breakdowns, the betrayals, the midlife crises. They are not accidents. They are the shadow's revolt, the unconscious demanding balance, the repressed truth breaking free. And here's the warning. Repression is not a long-term strategy. It is a debt, and every debt comes due. So the question becomes unavoidable. What have you buried so deep that it now lives through you? Because in the end, the shadow is patient. It doesn't care how long it waits. A year, a decade, a lifetime, it will return. And the longer it waits, the harder it strikes. That is the law of repression. And until you face it, you will be ruled by it. The shadow does not sleep. Even when you bury it, it slips through the cracks of your life. You can spot it in the little moments if you dare to look closely. Think about the sudden burst of anger that surprises even you, the sharp word that escapes before you can stop it, or the jealousy that rises when a friend succeeds, even though you smile and say, "I'm happy for you," or the quiet resentment that builds every time you say yes when you mean no. These are not accidents. They are the shadow at work. Jung described the shadow as a kind of invisible hand guiding us when we least expect it. You may think you're making rational choices, but the shadow tugs at the strings. You project your hidden emotions onto others. You sabotage relationships because of unacknowledged wounds. You numb yourself with distractions to avoid facing what's inside. Consider the helper who prides herself on being endlessly giving. On the surface, she looks like an angel, but in the quiet of her heart, she resents everyone she helps. Why? Because her shadow, her suppressed selfishness, her need for boundaries, leaks through as bitterness. Or the man who insists he is strong, calm, and composed. He never lets anyone see weakness. But then, without warning, he explodes in rage at the smallest provocation. That anger isn't random. It's the shadow, the vulnerability he refused to admit, returning with fire. And it isn't just in emotions. The shadow shows up in behaviors too, in addictions that numb the silence, in compulsions you can't explain, in habits that feel stronger than your will. Every obsession, every repeated mistake may be the shadow trying to find expression. Even dreams, Jung believed, are messages from the shadow, the stranger who chases you, the dark room you're afraid to enter, the animal with wild eyes. These symbols aren't random. They are your hidden self, knocking at the door of your consciousness. And this is the cruel irony. The harder you try to control your life, the more the shadow finds ways to control you. You try to be good, and the repressed bad bursts out. You try to be flawless, and the flaws leak through. You try to be pure, and temptation grows stronger. This is why Jung called the shadow the thing a person has no wish to be, because it's the part of you that you most deny, and therefore the part that most often rules you from the dark. Look at your own life. Where do you keep stumbling on the same patterns, the same failed relationships, the same bad habits, the same mistakes you swore you'd never repeat? That isn't bad luck. That's shadow, the law at work. Because until you see it, you can't break free of it. And here lies Jung's warning. If you don't face the shadow consciously, it will script your life unconsciously, and you will call it fate. If you want to see your shadow at work, don't look in the mirror. Look at the people around you. Relationships, friendships, romances, even family ties are the stage where the shadow performs most clearly. Why? Because what you cannot face in yourself, you project onto others. Carl Jung called this the law of projection. The qualities you exile in yourself don't vanish. They reappear on the faces of those you meet. Think about the people who irritate you the most: the arrogant colleague, the selfish friend, the controlling partner. Jung would ask, what part of yourself have you buried that resembles them? Take the woman who despises selfish people. She prides herself on being endlessly giving. Yet beneath her generosity lies her own repressed desire to put herself first. She doesn't allow herself to claim it, so she sees it, hates it, and fights it in others. Or the man who always falls in love with strong, dominant partners. He tells himself he's drawn to their confidence, but what he's really drawn to is his own unclaimed strength. The shadow of his power lives in them until he dares to live it himself. This is why relationships are often so magnetic or so toxic, because your shadow is using them as a mirror. Think about your strongest attractions and your fiercest hatreds. Both reveal your shadow. When you idolize someone, you are projecting your unclaimed potential onto them. When you despise someone, you are projecting your denied flaws. Jung said it plainly. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But most people never see this. Instead, they live in cycles of blame and disappointment. They keep choosing partners who wound them in familiar ways. They fight with friends over the same patterns. They cut people off without ever realizing they are running from themselves. This is why the shadow has such power in relationships, because until you withdraw your projections, you will always be ruled by them. You won't see your partner clearly. You'll see your shadow painted on them. You won't see your enemy clearly. You'll see your denied self in their face. And so relationships become not just about love or conflict, but about the unseen battle with your own shadow. Have you ever noticed how you can't escape certain patterns? The same type of partner who betrays you. The same type of friend who drains you. The same conflicts replayed again and again. That is the shadow insisting on being seen. It uses relationships as its stage, hoping that one day you'll finally notice the script. But until you do, the law holds. What you refuse to see in yourself will rule your relationships. This is why Jung believed that real intimacy requires shadow work. Because until you face your own hidden parts, you cannot truly see another person, nor can you be truly seen. And here lies the haunting truth. Many relationships fail not because of incompatibility, but because of shadows unacknowledged. Two people, each projecting, each blaming, each fighting ghosts that were never out there to begin with. The shadow writes the script, and you act it out, unless you turn to face it. The shadow is patient, but it is not silent. If you refuse to face it, it will eventually force its way into your life. Sometimes the collapse creeps in slowly, through exhaustion, a low-grade despair, or a vague sense that life has lost its meaning. Other times, it crashes through violently. A scandal, an affair, an addiction, a nervous breakdown. However it arrives, the message is the same. The shadow can no longer be ignored. Jung saw this often in the people who came to him. On paper, they looked flawless. The successful businessman, the dutiful wife, the respected professor. But beneath the mask, their lives were cracking. A man with an impeccable reputation caught stealing. A moral leader exposed in hypocrisy. A mother, endlessly giving, suddenly consumed with rage at her children. To the outside world, these collapses look like failures. But Jung believed they were something else. Invitations. He compared them to earthquakes. The ground of the persona, the carefully constructed mask, can only carry so much weight. Beneath it, the shadow presses upward. Eventually, the surface splits. And while the collapse is painful, it is also necessary, because only in the ruins can the hidden self finally emerge. This is why so many people experience crises in midlife. The first decades are spent building the mask, chasing approval, success, stability. But by midlife, the soul begins to rebel. The shadow grows restless. The questions grow louder. Is this all there is? Have I been living my own life, or just playing a role? For some, the collapse comes as burnout. Years of overwork end in a body that refuses to keep going. For others, it comes as addiction, the unacknowledged hunger taking control. For others still, it's a relationship crisis, infidelity, sudden divorce, or the slow realization that they no longer recognize the person they married. Each collapse looks different, but the pattern is the same. The shadow, long denied, is breaking down the walls. And here's the paradox. Though collapse feels like death, it is also the beginning of rebirth. Jung described this as the nigredo, the blackening in alchemy, when the old form must be destroyed before something new can be created. He called this process individuation, the journey toward wholeness. But it often begins with destruction, because the mask must shatter before the self can be seen. Most people, however, resist. They medicate the pain. They distract themselves with more performance. They try to stitch the mask back together and carry on. And in doing so, they miss the chance. But those who dare to face the collapse, who see it not as failure, but as message, step onto a path that few ever walk. A path where the shadow is no longer enemy, but guide. The collapse is the threshold, and beyond it lies transformation. The collapse, as devastating as it feels, is not the end. Jung believed it was the threshold, an initiation into the deeper work of becoming whole. And at the center of this work lies one task, facing the shadow. But what does it actually mean to face the shadow? It doesn't mean indulging every impulse or acting out your darkest desires. Nor does it mean rejecting the mask entirely and living without restraint. To face the shadow is to acknowledge, name, and integrate the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime denying. The first step is withdrawing the projections. Look at the people who trigger you, the ones you criticize, resent, or envy. Jung insisted, what you most despise in others often lives in you. The selfish colleague, the arrogant neighbor, the fragile friend. Each one may be a mirror. Instead of asking, why are they like this? Ask, what part of me am I refusing to see in them? This isn't comfortable, but it's necessary. Because every projection you withdraw pulls back a piece of your shadow. The shadow speaks through symbols, in dreams, fantasies, and slips of the tongue. Jung urged people to pay attention to the images that haunt them, the dark figure in your dreams, the recurring nightmare of being chased, the forbidden fantasy you dismiss. These are not random. They are the shadow knocking at the door. Journaling, dream analysis, even drawing or painting your inner figures can help. By giving form to the shadow, you give it a place in consciousness. To face the shadow, you must admit what you've denied. Yes, I feel envy. Yes, I crave recognition. Yes, I sometimes wish I could be selfish. Naming these truths doesn't make you bad. It makes you honest. Jung often reminded his patients, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Light comes not by denying the shadow, but by carrying it into awareness. Here lies the paradox. The shadow is not just a container of shame, but also of potential. The anger you repress may hold your buried strength. The selfishness you deny may contain the courage to set boundaries. The laziness you hate may hold the wisdom of rest. This is what Jung called the gold in the shadow. Facing it is not just about battling demons, but reclaiming lost treasures. Make no mistake, this work is not easy. Facing the shadow feels like looking into the eyes of a stranger who knows your secrets. It can shake your identity, destabilize your certainty, and strip away the mask you've worn for decades. But the alternative is worse, because what you refuse to face will rule you. By facing the shadow, you shift the balance. No longer an enemy chasing you, it becomes an ally walking beside you. No longer a puppeteer, it becomes part of your strength. The law remains. What you refuse to see will rule your life. But when you dare to see it, it loses its power to rule. To face the shadow is only the beginning. The deeper task, the one Jung saw as the very heart of human growth, is integration. Because the goal is not to defeat the shadow, nor to banish it. The goal is to weave it into the fabric of the self. Most of us live split lives. On one side is the mask, polite, productive, respectable. On the other is the shadow, raw, impulsive, hungry. Integration is the act of bringing these halves together. When you integrate, you stop saying, this is me, that is not. Instead you say, this too is me. You are not only the kind friend, you are also the one who sometimes resents. You are not only the achiever, you are also the one who longs for rest. You are not only the strong one, you are also the one who trembles. Integration dissolves the split. You stop living as fragments, you live as a whole. Here is the paradox. The shadow that once ruled you from the dark becomes a source of strength when integrated. Your anger, once destructive, now fuels your boundaries. Your envy, once corrosive, now points to desires worth pursuing. Your selfishness, once shameful, now teaches self-care. The energy that once sabotaged you begins to serve you. Because it is no longer hidden, it is harnessed. Jung noted that integration often unlocks creativity. Why? Because the shadow holds not only demons, but gold. The buried child who loved to draw, the silenced voice that wanted to sing, the dreamer who was told to be realistic. When these exiled parts return, they bring with them vitality. Life feels richer. Art flows. Relationships deepen. Work gains meaning. Integration also changes how you move in the world. You no longer live to please the mask. You no longer choose based on appearances. You choose based on truth. That might mean saying no when you used to smile and comply. It might mean pursuing the career that excites you, even if it disappoints others. It might mean showing vulnerability where once you hid behind strength. Integration demands courage, but it rewards you with authenticity, a life where you no longer perform, but actually live. Jung warned that ignoring the shadow leaves you half alive, but he also promised, by integrating it, you become whole. The privilege of a lifetime, he said, is to become who you truly are. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means you can look in the mirror and see yourself, all of yourself, without shame. It means you carry both light and dark, not in conflict, but in balance. And in that balance lies freedom. Picture again the man walking through the city at night. In the beginning, his shadow stalked him, dark and menacing, pulling the strings of his life. But after integration, the image changes. The shadow no longer lurks behind. It walks beside him, not as master, not as enemy, but as part of him. That is integration. Not escape from the shadow, but union with it. The shadow is not something you defeat once and for all. It will follow you for as long as you live. But the question is simple. Will it stalk you from behind, pulling your strings, or will it walk beside you as part of who you are? Jung believed the shadow would always be present. The difference between a life ruled by it and a life liberated from it is whether you have the courage to see it. Because the law is unbreakable, what you refuse to see will rule you. But here's the paradox. What you dare to see can set you free. Imagine again the man walking through the city at night. At first, his shadow followed him like a predator, long and menacing, dictating his choices in secret. Every streetlight stretched it larger. Every turn reminded him it was still there. But now, after the collapse, after the confrontation, after the integration, the scene has shifted. He no longer runs from it. He no longer pretends it isn't there. This time, the shadow does not stalk him. It walks beside him. It is no longer his jailer, but his companion. The shadow is not your curse. It is your unfinished self. Your denied emotions, your buried talents, your silenced truths. It will always be there, waiting for recognition. If you refuse it, it will rule you from the dark, in your anger, your addictions, your broken relationships, your repeating mistakes. But if you face it, it will return its power to you. The enemy becomes an ally. The weakness becomes a strength. The darkness becomes a source of light. This is Jung's promise. You do not have to live as a mask, nor as a puppet of the unconscious. You can live as a whole human being, light and dark, shadow and self, together. So tonight, when you look in the mirror, ask yourself, what part of me have I refused to see? What trait in others irritates me because it secretly belongs to me? What dream, fear, or desire have I locked away in the dark? Because whether you acknowledge it or not, your shadow is always with you. And if you want freedom, if you want wholeness, if you want to live your own life instead of being ruled by hidden forces, you must turn and face it. Your shadow will always follow you. The choice is yours. Ignore it, and it will rule your life. Face it, and it will make you whole. If this journey into Jung's shadow has opened something in you, subscribe to Factspire TV. Not for comfort, not for illusions, but for truths that challenge you and free you.